Hi everyone, I'm going to go over the quiz review for graphing sine and cosine functions. So here is how you can graph basic sine and cosine functions. This is not examples where there is a phase shift. Also, we'll be working with degrees and radians. So as you know, in the sine function, sine of x has between one cycle, goes from 0 to 360. So there are 3 x-intercepts starting at 0, 180, and then at 360. And then the cycle just repeats itself. And then there's a maximum in between the first 2 intercepts and a minimum between the second 2 intercepts. So just reviewing the basic sine function, it starts at 0, max at 90, intercept at 180, min at 270, and then back to 0 at 360. Okay, but then cosine will start at 1, and then it's just like a 90-degree shift. So it starts at 1, has a min at 9, or intercept at 90, min at 180 to 0. I know this is not very to scale because that would look more like that. Back to the intercept at 270, and then back up to 1 at the end of the cycle, but both have a cycle of 360. So we went over in class that to find, you have an equation, the sine of bx, if there's a number there, that will make it have the opposite effect. So if there's a 2, that means the number of cycles will double in one between 0 and 360. If there's a 1/2, that means it'll get wider by a factor of 1/2. So the 1/2, you'll have only a half as many cycles in one, so it'll get wider. So if it's 1/2, it would look more like this, and so be a lot longer. So to find the period, you would take 360 and divide it by b, or 2 pi and divide it by b. So number 1 on the quiz review is y equals 3 sine of 1/4 x. Okay, so that means we would first find our period. Now, I could do 360 divided by 4, which means we'd be divided by 1/4, which means we'd be multiplying by 4, because that's the reciprocal, and that would give me a really big number. So instead of working in degrees for this question, I found it easier to work in radians. So if I did 2 pi divided by 1/4, or times 4, that would be 8 pi. So 8 pi is the length of one cycle. And it wants you to graph 2 cycles, so that means we're going to graph all the way to 16 pi. So if you divide your period by 4, then you get the interval in which you will have an intercept, a maximum, or a minimum. So that means every 2 pi, you'll either have an intercept, a maximum, or a minimum. So you know for sine, it starts at 0, has a max, intercept, min, intercept, and then it repeats the cycle. So I'm going to use that fact to graph it. Okay, so I'm going to extend this page and then make my graph. So I'm going to start at 0, and then we're going up 3 units because the amplitude is 3. Always label your x and y axis and label the interval that you decided on. So since our intervals are 2 pi, I'm going to go ahead and make this every pi. So it'd be 4 pi, 8 pi, 10 pi, 12 pi. Looks like I'm going to need to go a little bit further because I need to go to 16 pi to complete 2 cycles. Okay, and then that would be 14 pi, and then finally 16 pi. All right, and then I'm going to put 0 on the y-axis, and then remember we decided 2 pi was our interval, so 2 pi units to the right will have a maximum point, and then 2 pi units to the right will have an intercept, and then 2 pi more. I think I skipped something. I think I skipped 6 pi. Whoops. Oh boy. Okay, let me redo all this. So 6 pi, it'd be 8 pi, 10 pi, 12 pi, 14 pi, and then finally 16 pi. Okay, so and then 2 pi over, we're going to have a minimum. 2 pi over is back at 0. So that would complete one cycle. And then you would just repeat that to get another cycle. So maximum, intercept, minimum, intercept. And these technically keep going, so you can add arrows. And that's how you graph a sine function. Okay, the next question is y equals sine of 5x. So in this one, if I did 2 pi over 5 to get the period, that would give me a fraction. So in this one, it's probably more favorable to work in degrees. And 360. Unless it says otherwise. On the quiz, you can choose. But sometimes it'll give you a degree in the parentheses, so then you work with degree. If it has a pi in there, that means you're going to be wanting to work with radians. So 360 divided by 5 is 72. So 72 is our period. Then if you divide it by 4, you would get 18, which means every 18 degrees, we're going to either have an intercept or a min or max. So let's set up our x and y axis. The way I did it on mine is I went in increments of 10 because that just made more sense to me. You could go in increments of 18 if you want. It just seems kind of silly to me to do that. So I'm going in tens. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. And then if I want 2 cycles, I'm going to have to go to 150 because that would be 144. So the cycle will end after 72 and then 144. So I need 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So that'd be 150. And I'm going to go ahead and label my evens. Oops. That's that. That's that. So that'd be 120 and 140. Okay. And the amplitude here is 1. So I just need 1 here and -1 here. This is sine till we start at the origin. So that means I'm going to have a maximum at 18. And then 18 degrees later will be at 36. So at 36, we're going to have an intercept. And then 18 degrees later, we will be at 54. So that'll be about here. And then 18 degrees later, we'll be at 72. And that completes one cycle. And I'm going to let you go ahead and just keep adding 18 degrees to get another full cycle. For number 3. 3 is the first time on this worksheet we come across cosine. So -5 cosine of pi x. And since it's pi x, that means I'm going to be working with 2 pi instead of 360. So 2 pi divided by b, which is pi, is equal to 2. So that means our period is 2 units. If you divide it by 4, every 1/2 of a unit, we're going to have our intercept or maximum or minimum. So I guess I'm going to just go in ones or 1/2s. So this is going to be pretty short here. And then the amplitude is -5, which means that we're going to be starting at -5. So not entirely to scale, at least on here. You can make your graph look more to scale if you want. Okay. So we're starting at the intercept because that's how cosine works. And the first coordinate would be 1/2 of a unit later. That'd be your intercept. And then at 1 would be your maximum. And then half a unit later would be another intercept. And then half a unit later would be back at your minimum, your starting point. And then you would continue continue that process. Okay, hopefully yours looks a little neater than mine. And that's that equation. For number 4, y equals 1/2 cosine of 45x. 45 is meant to be degrees. So we're taking 360, dividing it by 45, and you get 8. So 8 is the length of one cycle. It's kind of similar to number 1 with the sine. If you divide it by 4, you would get 2. So every 2 units, we're going to have an intercept or maximum or minimum. The amplitude is 1/2, so that's going to be short. And then we're going every 2 units. So, you can set your x-axis however you want. You can go in ones, you can go in twos, you can go in halves, whatever. I'm just going to go in ones. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 is one cycle. So I'm going to need to make this longer. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 16. So that'd be 2 cycles. All right. So this is cosine. So we're starting at the y-intercept. Then you're going to have an intercept at 2, minimum at 4, intercept at 6. And then intercept at 8, maximum at 8, intercept at 10, minimum at 12, intercept at 14, and a maximum at 16. Okay, and there is one more question on the quiz review, number 5. So y equals 2 sine of 2/3 x. And for this question, you would do 360. Since you have a fraction, I would prefer degrees. If you divide that by 2/3, you're actually multiplying by 3/2. And so if I multiply this by 3/2, this would be 180. Then 180 times 3 is 540. So 540 degrees is the length of one cycle. That's pretty long, right? So if I double that, that would be 1080. And then the amplitude is 2. Remember, we divide that by 4. So if you divide 540 by 4, you would get 135. So 135 is the length from one point to the next. Those are our intervals. I wouldn't necessarily put it in 135s. I would go in 45-degree increments. That's what I did when I made this. So I'm going to make this a little bit extra long. This is amplitude of 2. So I'm going to go up to 2 and negative 2. So 45 degrees. So 90, 180, 270, and then 360. Next would be 450, and then 540. So you would need a whole nother cycle after that. So I'll let you keep doing that. So it starts at 0, and then every 135 degrees you have a maximum. So that's 135, or you have an intercept. So if you add 135 to that, you would get 210, 270. If you add 135 to that, you would get this value here, 405. Then if you add 135 to that, you would get 540. Okay, and then you just continue the pattern. So that is the quiz review. Those are the 5 questions. The quiz will be very similar to that. And I hope watching this video helped. Remember, all you do is take your b, take your 360, divide it by the b, or 2 pi, and then divide that by 4 to figure out your intervals. Then look at your amplitude, whether it's sine or cosine, and graph 2 full cycles.